Yeah, so we have Gulf War era and post 9/11 era. I'll start with the most difficult ones to understand for Gulf War, which are something called MUCMIs, and undiagnosed illnesses. And it's extremely confusing. And I'm just going to break it down Barney style on how I, receive information. And so there are three MUCMIs. MUCMI stands for medically unexplained chronic multi-symptom illness.
It's a
MUCMI,
mouthful.
right? So that is, if I was to translate that into Americanese, right? It would be, hey, we don't know where this came from, but enough veterans from this era have it that it's now presumptive, right? That's basically what an MUCMI means. So there's three of them. There's chronic fatigue syndrome, so CFS, and often that's called Gulf War syndrome, Gulf War illness. It's all the same, right? You're tired, you're fatigued, something's happening. That's chronic fatigue syndrome. You have fibromyalgia, and then you
Mm,
have irritable bowel syndrome. Yes, IBS can be presumptive. It can be under the medically unexplained, the MUCMI, right? And to diagnose chronic fatigue syndrome, I'll start with that one first. Um, the only way to get a diagnosis of an undiagnosed illness, and I'll explain that in a second, is to rule everything out, right? So, hey, your fatigue syndrome isn't from sleep disturbances. It's not
mm,
from chronic pain. It's not from that. It's not from this. It's not from that. Therefore, we don't know what it's from. That's what makes it an undiagnosed illness. You still technically have a diagnosis, but a diagnosis has a cause. Okay, that's
right.
why it's an undiagnosed illness. So the VA is basically saying, "Hey, something's happening. We just don't know where it came from." Boom, CFS, fibro, those fall into that category. Now, IBS isn't that complicated. You can get a colonoscopy, get scraped, do all that, 40-year-old man stuff. I'm not there yet. That's a old. I had to give it back to you. You had to get checked for colon cancer and all that stuff. And if you have IBS and there's no cause, then it's presumptive under the MUCMI. Now, there's undiagnosed illnesses, and to have an undiagnosed illness, you have to have symptoms of the undiagnosed illness. Okay. So I'm just going to read a few of them, right? So fatigue, skin, and headaches. There are many, many more, but those three can also be presumptive under the undiagnosed illness. So, yes, migraines can be presumptive for Gulf War, and that's an overlap. It also involves Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then Southwest Asia. And I'll explain what Southwest Asia means here in a second, right? So, one of my good friends has migraines connected as a presumptive, right? And I'll tell you it's very rare because usually that has a cause. But if there's no cause, it can be a symptom of an undiagnosed illness. That's what MUCMI is, right? Now, do you have to understand that to submit these claims and be presumptive? No, you don't. All you do is, hey, I got a current diagnosis. Let's submit the claim. Let the VA do VA stuff. The VA is going to do MUCMIs. They're going to do um, undiagnosed illness. You don't have to tell the VA, hey, this is a PACT Act claim. You don't have to do that. The VA is going to look at your records and look at your evidence and make that determination. In fact, you can't tell the VA to pack that claim because they don't, okay, I don't care. I'm going to look at your evidence, right? The only thing I'll add to that, and I'll shoot it back over because MUCMIs are probably the most ambiguous thing about these presumptives for Gulf War. Let's talk about Southwest Asia Theater of Operations. And so to fall into the Gulf War era for those MUCMIs, there's a list. It says Southwest Asia AO. Okay, I'll tell you what that is. And then there's additional countries on top of that, and that's the post 9/11 overlap, right? So you have Afghan, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, Syria, or Jordan. So in addition to Southwest Asia, Afghan, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, Syria, or Jordan. Well, now let's look at what is Southwest Asia. Why does the VA do this instead of just list them out? I don't know. Okay. It's just what they do. So let's talk about what Southwest Asia is, right? You have Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi. There's a neutral zone between Iraq and Saudi that also counts. Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, and oh, by the way, for our Navy seamen out there and women, that's a Navy joke. You have the Gulf of Aden, the Gulf
I
of
think it's
Oman,
I think it's sailors there.
sailors. Oh, okay, okay, all right, yeah. So the Gulf of Aden, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea. Oh, and by the way, the airspace of all, basically the entire Middle East. Okay, that is Southwest Asia and Gulf War presumptive list for MUCMIs. Now that the hard stuff is out of the way, and trust me, we are absolutely going to put that link there so you can see all of that. Um, now that all that's out of the way, I'll kick it back to you, Jason, on just your thoughts on Gulf
Yeah,
War era
yeah.
presumptives.
So this is a whole different time, right? So the Vietnam folks had to wait decades for this
Hmm.
type of stuff to come into effect. Now, I get it. For some of us, you still had to wait a decade or even two in some cases, right? But this is much faster than it was for the Vietnam folks. There's a list, right? There's a decent list of cancers and there's a decent list of other conditions, right? Most commonly, you're going to hear the things like the rhinitis and sinusitis, that type of stuff. And then there's a whole host of different types of cancers, mostly from like the collarbone up type of cancers. But here's the big thing. This is the takeaway that I really want everybody to understand. You may not have these conditions today, but guess what? You're getting a snapshot of what your future might have, and it's scary.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, right? Get checked. Like, I don't care how old you are. Go get checked. Like, hey, look, I need to make sure that I'm like good to go, right? Here's a list. If you're going to a private doctor or even your VA doctor, doesn't really matter. Hey, here's a list of the presumptives for the things that I've been exposed to. Can we like make sure that I'm like not in any of those boats? Because as we all know, treating any sort of major issue is much better if you catch it up front early, right? Catch it up front early. You can help to get it into remission and what have you. So my thing is, one, get checked, make sure that that you don't have anything major going on. You have a great snapshot here of some horrible issues that could arise, and you just want to be ahead of it. The second piece is mostly look. The VA is such a weird world, right? It's like everything horrible is good and everything good is horrible, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm at 100% because I got all these horrible things, or hey, I don't have anything really that bad. I'm only at 10%. It sucks, right? So it's this weird world. And I guess that if you had to pick which bucket to be in, you would much rather probably have the illnesses versus the cancers. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So read through all of these things on anything, any presumptive conditions criteria that you meet as far as the times, dates, locations, what have you. Read the list of presumptives and just be aware of them. Be aware that they exist out there. And if you start to develop any signs or symptoms, go get checked for it, get diagnosed. The diagnosis is it's the major piece of your claim. You know that you serve somewhere, and if the VA had to find it for you, they could. It's better if you just provide it yourself. But that diagnosis piece is really, really important. I would say that the biggest ones that it's the sinusitis, rhinitis, bronchitis, COPD are kind of like that's probably the big four of
Yeah.
just like the tidal wave of people coming in filing claims. So there's a lot of just respiratory issues going on, and obviously associated with burn pits and all that stuff, and just the literal shit in the air, right?